لقد جاءكم رسول من أنفسكم عزيز عليه ما عنتم حريص عليكم بالمؤمنين رؤوف رحيم.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. فإنشاءالlah ta'ala, this is our first class. First and foremost, Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from us and accept our fasting and our dua and make us from those people that they get the blessing of being free from the hellfire, and from those people that their dua is accepted. Inshallah ta'ala, we finished recently a book that's called Khulasa Ta'zim al-Ilm, Glorifying Knowledge. And that book was a book that mentioned to us how to seek knowledge and the right steps to take when you're seeking knowledge. Just like, you know how lawyers and doctors and people in different professions, they all have their own unique and different way that they carry themselves. So the doctor, he carries himself differently, he talks different, the lawyer talks different, even the officers and the people in that field, they act and they have a different haircut, they talk in a different style. But just like that, the student of knowledge also, when he embarks on this journey of seeking knowledge, he has to act different. There's manners that he has to act upon. And that's what that book was showing us, how the student of knowledge should treat himself, how he should treat his teachers, how he should treat his books, and so on and so forth. And inshallah ta'ala, today we're going to look at a small book or a poem written by, or it has been mentioned that it's been written by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. The poem is called Laamiyah, Shaykh al-Islam. Laamiyah, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. The Laamiyah of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. This book, does anyone have the English or does anyone have a copy of that book with them in English or in any type of language? Yeah, if you can send it, inshallah ta'ala, to this here, it would be nice, so that the brothers and sisters can also see it. But we won't go into the book today. We will not go into the actual poem today. We'll just talk about the book in general. So about this book here, this book has been attributed to Shaykh al-Islam. It has been connected with Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And that's why the scholars, they differ. And they say that, is this book really his or not? The scholars, they differed, and they say, did Shaykh al-Islam, did he really write this book or did he not write this book? And the scholars, they differed into two. The first group of scholars, and this is the majority of them, al-qawl al-awwal, the first group of scholars, they say this book or this poem is attributed to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And the majority of the scholars, this is how this is what they accepted, and this is the view that they carried. Also there have been manuscripts that have been found with the works of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and this poem was included in those manuscripts. So there's in many different times that they found manuscripts, and within those manuscripts they found that there were this poem was included in the or it was in the area where many of his works was there. Also the topic that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah talks about, in this book is the same topic that he was touching upon in all of his other books. The topic that he talks about this book or in this poem is the same topic and the same points that he was addressing at that time. And also the scholars, they ascribe this poem to him. So this is the first view of the scholars, that they mention that this book is attributed to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah because of these reasons. The second group of scholars, and from them is Shaykh Muhammad Salih al-Uthaymin. He mentioned that no, أنها لا تصح أصلا عن الشيخ, that you cannot ascribe this to the author. Shaykh Muhammad Salih al-Uthaymin says, he says, how can you attribute a book to Shaykh al-Islam when he did not clearly say that this is my book or this is my poem? And he also mentioned, how can you attribute this book or this poem to Shaykh al-Islam when also his students did not mention this? Because Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, in a lot of his work, he would also mention, and I wrote a poem on this topic, and I have written on this something that I call this and that. So they mentioned that how come he did not mention it in his books that he wrote this book, and how come none of his students attributed this book to him? And they also come with another evidence. This, we are talking about the group of scholars that they don't attribute this poem to Shaykh al-Islam. They also mentioned that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, he wrote a line from this poetry. So in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he used a line from this poem that we're studying. He used the line that says, قُبْحًا لِمَنْ نَبَذَ الْكِتَابَ وَرَاءَهُ وَإِذَا اسْتَدَلَّ يَقُولُ قَالَ الْأَخْطَلُ. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, he wrote this line, and in this line he said, وَقَدْ أَنْشَدَ فِيهِمْ. He says, and the poet have said. And he included this line of poetry. So they mentioned that, look, why would, if this was his own poetry, why would he come and say, and the poet have said, وَقَدْ أَنْشَدَ فِيهِمْ, and from one of the poems he said, قُبْحًا لِمَنْ نَبَذَ الْكِتَابَ وَرَاءَهُ وَإِذَا اسْتَدَلَّ يَقُولُ قَالَ الْأَخْطَلُ. But so the scholars they reply back to this, and they said that this is a common style. This is the way of the scholars, that when they would mention something of their own work, they would not clearly mention it. They would not attribute it to themselves clearly, and they would say, and it has been said, or they would say, and what has been said. But they said that no, this is not a strong evidence. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Most likely, and what's more apparent is that this poem is the poem of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And also, if it isn't, alhamdulillah, the information is authentic and is something that we can all benefit from. For both groups, there's good in it. But what looks like is that this poem is attributed to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And brothers and sisters, inshallah, I just want to advise myself to please try your best to take notes. Try your best to gather your notes, and have a separate notebook that you're gonna title this book. And also, inshallah, try to stay with us till the end of the poem, so you can have the whole thing completed. And also try to review. Take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just maybe before class, to review what we talked about the class before. This is the only way a student, and we're all students, this is the only way we're going to grow in our knowledge. And if we don't take notes, and if we're just listening to this lecture, and you think you're gonna gain knowledge, this is not correct. If that was the case, then our fathers and our uncles would be more knowledgeable than us, because how many khutbas, how many Jum'ah khutbas did they go to? How many lectures did they listen to? But the point is not listening. The point is trying, inshallah ta'ala, to have a dedicated notebook. And alhamdulillah, we have a folder where we encourage everyone to share their notes. To inshallah ta'ala, everyone, for me to be able to put this PowerPoint like this, it's time consuming, and I usually just like to grab the book and read. I came the last, I think I spent maybe 10-15 minutes, not a long time, to put this together. But I want to encourage also everyone to try to take notes, organize your notes, have a dedicated place that you're going to take notes, and share your notes on the folder. Everyone, try to share whatever you can or whatever you wrote down on that folder, so everyone will benefit. So this is the poem. The poem, it has been attributed to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Some of the majority of the scholars, they say this belongs to him, and this what seems to be what's correct. And some other scholars, they say no, we cannot attribute this to him. Now, why was this poem written? Why was this written? So this poem was written as a reply to a question. And as we mentioned, many times books have been written because of questions. So someone came to Shaykh al-Islam and he asked him a question. This is why the first line of the poem is Ya sa'ili an madhhabi wa aqidati. Oh, you who's coming to ask about my aqidah, my creed. So this book was written because of a question that came and it was asked and that was brought up to the Shaykh. And the question was something related to aqidah. The question was related to aqidah. And this is why in this poem the Shaykh did not talk about every single detail in aqidah. He didn't talk about all the affairs in aqidah. That he didn't even talk about all of the 6 pillars of iman. Usually in aqidah books, they address and they talk about the 6 pillars of iman. This is the core. But the Shaykh didn't talk about it here because he was asked a question. Can you give a brief definition of aqidah? Yeah, we're going to come to it, inshallah. We're going to define aqidah and so on and so forth. But aqidah means creed, what the Muslim believes in. Aqidah means what the Muslim believes in with no doubt. With no doubt. This is aqidah. So the person came to, and the person who asked Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, we're going to talk about this more when we come to that line. But the person that was asking, seems like they were not asking it sincerely, that they were asking to cause some type of fitna and some type of trouble. It wasn't a sincere question. But ala kulli hal, the Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, they asked him a question about certain things, and with that he answered back with this poetry. He answered back with this poetry. So this book was written because of a question that was asked to Shaykh al-Islam. The question was related to aqidah, and Shaykh al-Islam, he answered those questions in a form of poetry. And then the name of the book is called Laamiyah. It's called Laamiyah. Why is it called Laamiyah? Because it ends with a lam. The abiyat, every line, the last letter will be a lam. It ends with a lam, so it's called Laamiyah. And you have other poems like that as well. We have also poems that are like that. So you have a manduma called Al-Mimiyah. Al-Mimiyah. What do you think this ends with? What letter do you think this poem would end with? Al-Mimiyah. Naam. So a poem like that would end with a meme. You have Ibn Qayyim, he has a poem called Nuniyah, and that ends with a noon. Al-Ha'iyah, the Manzumat Al-Ha'iyah, that also ends with a ha. Manzumat Al-Ra'iyah, that ends with a ra. For the Shaykh, this poem is called Al-Laamiyah because it ends with alam. It ends with alam. Does this book have another name? Yes, it has another name. This book is also called Aqidat Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. So this book also has another name, Aqidat Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. It also has another name, and that name is what? Aqidat Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. It's also called the Creed, the Aqidah of Shaykh al-Islam. So you can go to a bookstore. You can go to a bookstore and you tell the person, you know, I'm looking for the Laamiyah of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Or you can also say, I'm looking for the Aqidah of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. That the poem of that talks about the Aqidah of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. So this book is also referred to as Aqidah Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Inside the book, right? What's inside the book? Once inside the book, you have the poetry has about 16 verses, has 16 abiyat. Abiyat mean a line. The one whole line is called bayt. So it has 16 abiyat. Very short, but also very heavy in meaning. Very short, but is very heavy in meaning. And also, it has a nice rhythm and it's easy for us to memorize. It has a nice rhythm and it's also easy for us to memorize. And inshallah ta'ala, we're gonna try to memorize it all together. And every class, maybe we can try to take 2-3 lines. Whatever line that we take for that class, that week we try to memorize it. And the beginning of that class, the beginning of the next class, we will take maybe 5 minutes and see if anyone wants to recite and get tested on it. So we're gonna try to, inshallah ta'ala, memorize it together. And if a person memorizes these 16 lines of poetry, you would your aqidah would be very sound. You would have the foundation would be there. Because Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he talked about the major issues in aqidah, the major matters that every Muslim needs to know, and the major matters that the Muslims they differed upon. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he comes and he mentions this in this line of poetry. We mentioned that this poem is about 16 lines, very easy to memorize, and inshallah ta'ala we're gonna try to memorize it together. Who here is planning to memorize this poetry? Can you just raise your hand so we can see how many brothers and sisters are planning to memorize this line of poetry? Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, inshallah. And we all will, inshallah ta'ala, try to memorize it together. وَأَنَا مَعَكُمْ, and I'm also with you guys, inshallah. So inshallah ta'ala, it'll be very easy. And Brother Abdullah Jamil, he wanted us to finish this in the month of Ramadan, in 4 classes. But this book, we can do it. We can finish it in 3-4 classes, but it's not going to be in detail. If we do it in 3-4 classes, it will not be in detail. It will just be a quick. But inshallah ta'ala, we will take our time and we will even continue after Ramadan. So today's our first class. We're going to resume again the following class. We won't have class the last 10 days of Ramadan, the last 10 nights of Ramadan. We won't have class then. And then after Eid, we're going to resume, inshallah. So make sure you have the information of the brothers and sisters in the generation, so you keep in touch with them. And then after Ramadan, we're going to continue from there, inshallah. So I hope everyone can stay with us. So this book, it has about 16 lines, short and heavy in meaning. Now, what does the poem talk about? So the poem talks about major belief of the people of the Sunnah. Major belief of the people of the Sunnah. Major belief of the people of the Sunnah. It talks about the virtue of the companions. The virtue of the companions. It talks about tawassul and you know, and getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the right way. It talks about referring back to the Quran and the Sunnah. Like, talks about what you should use as an evidence. It also talks about the sifat, talks about the attributes of Allah and how to believe in them. and how to understand them. Also talks about seeing Allah in the hereafter. Seeing Allah in the hereafter. Also talks about an-nuzul, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends to the lowest heaven. Also talks about the mizan in the hereafter. The mizan, the scale, and the hawd, the pond, and the sirat, the bridge. Talks about these affairs in the hereafter. How do we believe in it? What is the mizan? What's going to be measured? Is it our body, our good deeds, the hawd, and the sirat? You'll also talk about the punishment of the fire, and also the reward of, and also the divine wisdom that's connected to the qadr, that's connected to the decree. It will also talk about the questioning in the grave. There are people that reject this. They say there's no questioning in the grave. He also talks about, and at the end he ends with, this is the aqidah of the four imams. He ends with saying this is the aqidah of the four imams. And the reason why he says this is the aqidah of the four imams, because at that time people were very extreme in following the imams. They were very extreme in following the imams. So he says those that you're extreme in following will also follow them in aqidah. Why you choose to only follow them in fiqh? Follow them also in aqidah. For this is what the book will talk, inshallah. This is what the poem will cover. This book has different explanation. The scholars, they paid a lot of attention to this book. The scholars, they paid a lot of attention to this book. So we should as well. So if the scholars, and this is, the student of knowledge, when he wants to study a book, or when he wants to know what book he should do, what book he should study, you should always go to the books that the scholars, they served. You should go to the books that the scholars, they spend a lot of time explaining and talking about, and giving lectures on. Why? Because that shows you that this is an important book. If the ulama are paying attention to it, I should also pay attention to this book. If the scholars always mentioning this book in his lectures, maybe this is the book that I should also be familiar with. And there are many different explanations. The most famous explanation of this book is, you find that is Al-La'i Al-Bahiyya Sharh Laamiyah to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and it's authored by Ahmed bin Abdullah al-Mardawi. This explanation, this sharh by Shaykh Ahmed bin Abdullah al-Mardawi is the most famous explanation of this book. And even Shaykh Salih Fawzan, he praised that explanation, and he has a ta'liq, he has a small commentary of that book itself. So on that book, Shaykh Salih Fawzan also, he added some of his comments to that book as well. And Shaykh Salih al-Suhaimi as well also has an explanation of this book. For this is about the book, about the name of the book and what it covers, and also different explanation of that book. Any questions so far with what we covered? Is there any question about what we covered so far? Okay, Alhamdulillah. Now, before we go to the book, we're gonna go to the author of the book. We should know, the more you know the author of the book, the more you will be closer to, the more you will feel a little bit closer to the book. And for that one, I don't have a PowerPoint. And for that one, I don't have a PowerPoint. For inshallah ta'ala, we should try to listen and take notes as well, inshallah. For the Sheikh, his name is, the Sheikh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, his name is Ahmed bin Abdul Halim Ibn Abdul Salam. His name is Ahmed Ibn Abdul Halim Ibn Abdul Salam. His kunya is Abu al-Abbas. Abu al-Abbas is his kunya. And we talked about what a kunya is and we talked about who should the different ruling of kunya. And also the laqab. The laqab of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah is Taqiyuddin. His laqab was Taqiyuddin. Also, his name is Ahmad ibn Abd al-Halim ibn Abd al-Salam. Ahmad Abd al-Halim ibn His name is Ahmad ibn Abd al-Halim ibn Abd al-Salam. And his kunya is Abu al-Abbas. His kunya is Abu al-Abbas. His kunya is Abu al-Abbas. Who can tell us what is a kunya? Who can remind us what is a kunya? A nickname.
A nickname.
A nickname. Okay. Now, what else?
Or it's given a title for the characteristics of a person.
For the characteristic, that's for the laqab. That's for the next thing. But a kunya is something that starts with Abu or It starts with Abu Huraira, Aisha, or Abdullah, like that. Now, does the kunya have to be your oldest daughter or your oldest son? Can you name it after your younger son, maybe, instead of? Yes.
No.
Yes, you can. It does not have to be restricted. You can name it after your youngest child. Does kunya, you have to have, if I don't have a child, can I still have a kunya? Yes, even if you don't have a child, you can have a kunya. Aisha radiallahu anha never had a son, never had a child, but she was known as Abdullah. Ahsant. Also, can you name yourself? Can you give a name? Can you give a kunya to using a inanimate object? Like, does it have to be a human? Can you have a kunya with an animal? Yes, you can.
Abu Bakr Siddiq.
Ahsant. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And also Abu Huraira. Huraira means the small cat. And also Abu Turab. Ali bin Abi Talib. What does Bakr mean? Bakr means a small camel. A small camel. Ahsant. Also Abu Turab. Abu Turab, Ali bin Abi Talib was named Abu Turab, and Turab means what? The dirt, the dust. For kunya, and what was the Prophet kunya? What was the Prophet? Abu al-Qasim. The Prophet also had another kunya that Jibril called him by. The Prophet kunya was Abu al-Qasim. By the way, this kunya Abu al-Qasim, there's something special about it. The Prophet said no one can give themselves that name. No one can name themselves Abu al-Qasim while he's alive. While he is alive. After his death, you can take on that name. Also, the Prophet also had another kunya. His name was Abu Ibrahim. His kunya was Abu, and Jibril came down and called the Prophet Abu Ibrahim. We have one kunya in the Quran. We have a kunya in the Quran. What is Allah mentioned one person in the Quran by his kunya? Abu Lahab. Tabbat yada Abi Lahabin wa tab. Abu Lahab. Ahsan. So this is the kunya. The Sheikh kunya is Abu al-Abbas. Abu al-Abbas. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, although his kunya is Abu al-Abbas, he never had any children and he was not married. And his laqab was Taqiyuddin. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he was also known as Shaykh al-Islam. So much so that if anytime somebody says Shaykhul Islam by itself, if somebody says Shaykhul Islam and he doesn't mention what scholar, automatically this means is Ibn Taymiyyah. So if somebody says Shaykhul Islam by itself, they are referring to Shaykhul Islam. If they say Shaykhul Islam, they're referring to Ibn Taymiyyah. Just like when they're talking, the companions, there were 1,000 companions that had different name, that had the name Abdullahi or Abdullah. 1,000 companions by the name of Abdullah. But when they mention Abdullah by itself, who are they referring to? When they mention Abdullah by itself in the books, they mean Abdullah bin Mas'ud. And also, they're referring to Abdullah bin Mas'ud. Also, when they mention the word Hafiz, Al-Hafiz, when they mention Al-Hafiz by itself, who are they referring to? When you who?
Ibn Hajar.
Ibn Hajar, na'am, mashallah. Ibn Hajar. When that title is mentioned, it refers to Ibn Hajar. For Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, his name was Ahmad bin Abdul Halim. His kunya was Abu al-Abbas. His laqab was Taqiyuddin, and he was Shaykh al-Islam as well. And we mentioned to call someone Shaykh al-Islam, it comes with conditions. What are those conditions? For the scholars, they mentioned to call someone the title that he is Shaykh al-Islam. There are 5 conditions, and there are that one is that the person needs to have knowledge of the Sharia. He needs to have knowledge of the Sharia. And number 2, so number 1, he needs to have knowledge of the Sharia. Knowledge of the Sharia. And number 2, the scholar needs to have contributed a lot to Islam. Then the person, the scholar needs to have what? Be someone that, number 2, contributed a lot to Islam. And he defended Islam. And number 2, known for his taqwa, known for his piety. And number 5, majority of the ummah accepted him. But these are the conditions that Ibn Hajar, he himself also mentioned, that for someone to be called Shaykh al-Islam, they should be known by knowledge of the Sharia, contributed a lot to Islam, defended the religion, known for their piety, and number 5, the majority of the ummah accept them. So Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, what is Ibn Taymiyyah? Where is this coming from? Ibn Taymiyyah, this name comes from the mother of his grandfather. So his great grandma. So the mother of his grandfather, she was named Taymiyyah. So Ibn Taymiyyah. So this name or this name Taymiyyah comes from comes from the mother of his grandfather. The mother of his grandfather, and she was a woman that used to preach and she used to give powerful reminders. Because of her, the rest of the family, they took on that nickname. Because of the mother of his grandfather, the rest of the family, they took on that name. We mentioned that Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, we know his name, we know his kunya, we covered his laqab, we know that he's called Shaykh al-Islam, and now we know also where this Ibn Taymiyyah comes from. That comes from the mother of his grandfather. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he was born either on the 10th or the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal. And the majority of the scholars, they say that he was born on the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal. in the year 661 after the Hijrah. 661 after the Hijrah. He was born in a city called Harran. In a city called Harran. And his family in a city called Harran, that is very close to Iraq. So his family, while they were living there when he was 5 or 7 or 6 years old, because of what was going around and things that was happening, the Tatars, they would come in, the Mongols, they would come in and they would attack the Muslims, and then they would be defeated, and then they would go back. So the Tatars, they would come attack the Muslims, and then they would be defeated, and then they would go back. Few months later, they would come back again. Because of this, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, his father, decided to move from Harran, and they went to Dimashq. They went to Syria. And the reason why they moved was because of the situation and the conditions that was taking place. And his family was a family that was known for knowledge. His father was a scholar. His grandfather was a huge scholar. And that's why. And his father was a scholar. But between his grandfather and his father and him, his grandfather is more knowledgeable than his father, and Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah was more knowledgeable than his father. So that's why when they talk about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah father, they say Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, the father, he was a scholar, he was a star, but they said that he is overshadowed by the moon, which they're referring to his grandfather, and also by the sun, referring to his son, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. For his father was a scholar, and his grandfather was even a huge scholar. And his grandfather, one of the famous book that he's known for is what? Al-Muntaqa min Akhbar Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. His grandfather wrote a book that talks about the fiqh of fiqh of fasting and fiqh of prayer and fiqh of purification. Al-Muntaqa min Akhbar al-Mustafa, and Al-Shawkani did an explanation of that book. Now, his brothers as well, they were also people of knowledge. He had a brother by the name of Abdul Rahman. He had a brother by the name of Abdullah. And also his brother Abdullah, he said about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said that he would be able to memorize everything that he sees. And he would write in few minutes what would take a scholar to write in days and weeks. So his brother Abdullah said that Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, everything he sees, he'll be able to memorize it. And he would write in few moments what it would take a scholar to write in few days and few weeks. But his handwriting was also very bad. His handwriting was not something easy to read. His handwriting was not something that was easy to read. So much so that one day Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he went to a place and he saw a few papers. He picked it up and he said, "Whoa, I cannot read this." And then he told the man, "Who wrote this paper? Who wrote this?" They said, "You don't recognize it? You're the one who wrote it." They said, "You're the one who wrote it." So his handwriting was something that was very, very difficult. And he also had a half brother by the name of Muhammad. And we can take from that a beautiful lesson, right? We can take from his life story some lessons. One, you'll find that his father was a scholar and his grandfather was a scholar. And his brothers were also people of knowledge. So that shows us that, when you're preaching, when you want to give da'wah, first and foremost, the da'wah should start from your house. First and foremost, when you're giving da'wah, you should give da'wah to your own family, to your mother, to your dad, to your brother, to your sister, to your wife, to your kids. That you should, because they are the one that deserve it the most. And you can find that his father and his grandfather, they were scholars, but you saw that they give time to their family. And this is why scholars also came from them as well. But it's very important that the husband, the wife, the mom, the dad, the brother, everyone should, if you are involved in da'wah, don't ignore your family. Don't give da'wah everywhere and anywhere, and you give da'wah everywhere, but you don't do it in your house. No, you should be able to give what inside, first and foremost, inside your house. And then Shaykh al-Islam, subhanallah, one of the mashayikh, he said, I have never given a lecture in public unless I first did it in my house. The Shaykh says, I've never give a lecture or a talk to outside except that at first I have done it to my family and I gave it to my family. But it's important that you give da'wah first and foremost to those that are close to you. وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, and warn the people that are close to you. قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ, save yourself and your family. But Shaykh al-Islam from his early life, he had a strong memory. And also another lesson we can take, Shaykh al-Islam, he did not used to write very well. He had a very tough handwriting. But that doesn't mean, sometimes, you see maybe your child with a bad handwriting, and you may say to yourself, he's not going to be a smart person, or he's not going to be a genius, or he's not going to be very bright. No, just because they might not be good in one thing, that doesn't mean they might not be good in one thing, but they might be a genius in many, many other things. For Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, his handwriting was not very strong, but as we will see, what he produced is something that the scholars, they say this is a karama, like a miracle that was given to him because of his knowledge. But just because someone cannot write, or someone's they're not understanding the first few times, that doesn't mean that that person should be labeled as someone who is not very bright. The parents should not feel bad. The teacher should not feel bad. They should encourage and push and find the strong point of that student, or you try to find the strong point of that child. Also, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he was very eager with his time. He used to take care of his time. When he was young, his father they were going out to a picnic, and they begged him to come. He said, no, I'm not gonna come. And then when they left and they came back home, his father said to him, you missed out today. Today was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful picnic. You missed out. He said, no, I did not miss out anything, my dear father. While you guys were gone, I was able to memorize this book from cover to cover. His father said, there's no way. He said, there's no way that you were able to cover this much. Then his father said, okay, bring me this book. Let me test you. And he tested him, and he tested him, and he passed. He tested him, and he passed the whole thing. But Shaykh Sam, he was very eager in taking care of his time. I'm sorry, if you can give me 1 second. Now, also he was very bright, and he had a very strong memory, and Allah gave him the ability to have a good way to debate. He always had a good way to prove himself and to prove his point, and he would always prove the other person wrong using their own evidence and their own proof. Shaykh Sam, when he was a young boy, like before he was a teenager, on his way to the masjid, there was an old Jewish man that had a small store, and every day the Jewish man would talk to Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah. He would always ask him questions back and forth, saying, why do you believe in this and this? They would always go back and forth And this, they would only talk while Sheikh Sam is walking to the masjid and back home. And within just few conversation, the old Jewish man, he accepted Islam. He accepted Islam. Also, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he also had the fear of Allah. You know, when he was young, his father told his teacher, this is 40 dirham. This is a amount of money. I want you to, every time he passes and he reads and he does a good job, give it to him. Act like you are the one who's giving him this money. So his father went to the teacher and gave him 40 dirham ahead of time. And he said, whenever he passes or whenever he does something that you're happy with, go ahead and give it to him. But the teacher offered this to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and Shaykh al-Islam, he became very upset. And he said, I took a promise from Allah that I would not take anything for the Quran. He said, I took a promise from Allah that I would not take anything for the Quran. You don't have to congratulate me. You don't have to give me something. He says, this is the speech of Allah. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, as a young, he kept on studying until when he was 19 years old, he was given the permission to give fatwas, to give a legal verdict. When he was 19, he was given the approval to give fatwas. And fatwa is something different. Fatwa is not like, somebody asks you, hey, I want to give, I'm not fasting, I'm unable to fast, what should I do? No, this is you're given an answer. But fatwa is something that is, did not happen in the past, and is something new, and it needs a lot of knowledge. You have to be someone who's well established to be able to go into that field. But at the age of 19, he was able to give fatwas. And at that age of 19, how many scholars were alive at that time? And then when he was 22 years old, his father passed away. So he took over the teaching position of his father in a place called Darul Hadith. In a place that was called Darul Hadith As-Sukkari. This was the place where the people would go for knowledge. Anyone that wanted knowledge at that time, that would be the known place. So at the age of 22, he took over that position and he started teaching. And also when it comes to his worship, his student Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, he said that I saw with my own eyes, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, one day from after Fajr, he was sitting in the same place until midday, and he would do his adhkar. And then after this, he came to me. When he noticed that I've been watching him, he said to me, listen, this is my breakfast. If I don't do this adhkar, if I don't sit like this, then I will be weak. My body will become weak. These are the people, the awliya of Allah. The awliya of Allah are people that, they feel weak if they're not worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They feel weak if they're not worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I met some that they were saying that they have a hard time breathing if they don't fulfill the act of worship that they're doing. They would see some, physical, they would have a physical feeling if they don't fulfill the goal and the worship that they want to do. So he said, this is my breakfast, and without it, I would feel weak, And then Shaykh Sa'd ibn Taymiyyah also said, he said, dhikr for me, it's like how the water is for the fish, The dhikr for me is like the water, how water is for the fish. If you take the fish out of the water, the fish is gonna die. So he said, this dhikr, that's what dhikr is for me. And he was also known to, whenever he had any problem, he would turn to Allah. He would seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he would make istighfar. If he didn't understand a matter, or if something was difficult, he would seek forgiveness from Allah. وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. When you forget something, Allah says, and remember Allah. So he would say astaghfirullah, and he would make dua. If he didn't understand something, he would ask Allah to forgive him, and he would make dua, oh Allah, help me understand this. And he would humble himself, he would put his face on the dirt. He wrote over 900 books. 900 books he wrote. Some we know and some we don't know. Some we have and some they are lost. Some and the majority of those books he wrote while he was in prison, because Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he went to prison 21 times. 21, all of his life, he went to prison about 21 times. So most of these books he wrote while he was in prison. And he wrote them without any source. There's no Google, there's no reference to go back to. No, he did it from his head. And in those books, the scholars, what they mentioned, like he would mention the verses and where they are. He would mention the ahadith and who narrated these ahadith and what books they are collected in. All of this from his memory. He would mention the difference of opinion from his memory. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said that for when I want to understand or look up one verse in the Quran, I would read 100 tafasir. 100 tafasir. He said I would read 100 tafasir for me to understand one verse, for me to be able to understand one verse. He said he would go and he would read 100 tafsir books to understand that verse. And as a student also, he quickly surpassed many of the older students. Many of the older students that were in his circle and that were seeking knowledge from Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he passed them very quickly. Even he passed his own teachers. And as a student, he would always, in a gentle way, have a good discussion with his teachers, to the point where he would help the teacher understand the point better. And a lot can be said about Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah when it comes to his knowledge, but look at what the scholars they have said. Al-Hafiz, Imam al-Dhahabi, a great scholar himself, he said that, he is far greater than the likes of me to inform of his qualities. Imam al-Dhahabi, he said, who am I to tell you guys about Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah? He said, if I were made to swear, he said, I can swear. If someone was to make me swear by Allah, I would. And I would say that I have never seen anyone like Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah with my own eyes. And he said, and Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he has never seen someone like him. So Imam al-Dhahabi, he said, I never saw someone like Imam Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and he himself never saw someone like himself. Al-Hafiz al-Mizzi, he said that I have never seen, same thing, he said, I've never seen the like of him, nor have he seen the like of himself. Another great scholar, Al-Alam ibn Diq al-Eid, he said that when I saw Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, رَأَيْتُ رَجُلًا, he said, I saw a man, all of the knowledge بَيْنَ عَيْنَيْهِ, I saw a man that all of the knowledge, every single type of knowledge is between his eyes. يَأْخُذْ مِنْهَا مَا يُرِيد وَيَدَعْ مَا يُرِيد. He takes whatever he desires, meaning that Allah made knowledge very easy for him. Allah made knowledge very, very easy for him. So Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, he says that when I saw Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, knowledge was made so easy for him. And Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, he used to defend Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. This is why when Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, when he passed away, when he died, this is when he started to go to prison even more and more and more. The famous, the Mufassir, Al-Hafidh Ibn Kathir, he said the same thing. He said that Shaykh Islam is a rare person, that everything he hears, he will memorize it. And he had knowledge of every single science. He said that if Shaykh al-Islam was to talk about fiqh, you would think this is his field. If he talked about Quran, you would think this is his field. But he says that this Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, all of his any science that he mentioned or that he talked about, you would think that this is the only field that he is familiar with. Or you would say that this is what he mastered. Also, Abu al-Hayyan al-Andalusi, another great scholar. He used, and this Abu al-Hayyan was a scholar of grammar. If you mention Ibn Hayyan, you also mention an-Nahu. So grammar and Ibn Hayyan, they go hand in hand together. So Ibn Hayyan, he used to praise Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah in the beginning, but he built a grudge and hatred against him towards the end. And one of the reason was because one of the reason that Ibn Hayyan he felt this was because Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Hayyan one time he was praising As-Sibawayh, a great scholar in the science of grammar. As-Sibawayh, a great scholar in the science of grammar. And Ibn Hayyan, he himself is a scholar of grammar, he was praising As-Sibawayh. And then Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, after they were talking, he said, do you know that Sibawayh, he is not the prophet of the grammar. He said, Ma kana Sibawayh Nabi an-Nahu. He is not the prophet of the grammar. Wala ma'soom. And he is not someone who's infallible. And he said, I found 80 mistakes in his book. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, I found 80 mistakes in Imam al-Sibawayh's book. And those 80 mistakes, he said, Sibawayh himself, he doesn't know it. And you don't know it yourself. For Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he's correcting a scholar, one of the greatest scholar of grammar. Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah says, he has 80 mistakes that he does know and you are unaware of as well. For Ibn Hayyan, when he heard this from him, you can imagine someone saying something like this about a teacher that you love, about a scholar that you look up to. So then he built some grudge and he disliked him from that, and he started to talk about him in a negative way. But before that, Shaykh al-Islam, he used to praise Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Imam al-Dhahabi, Imam al-Dhahabi again used to say that if there's a hadith that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah he doesn't know, you should consider that then most likely it's not a hadith. This is a little bit extreme, but to show you what the scholars are saying about this great man. Imam al-Dhahabi, who is a scholar himself, he said that if there's a hadith, a narration that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah he doesn't know, then most likely it is not a hadith. And then they also mentioned that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he knew more. He said that he knew more about the madhahib than the people of madhab themselves. So the scholars of the madhahib, the people of the madhahib, the people that mastered in the madhab of the Imam Abu Hanifa, they would come to him and he would tell them things about their own madhab and he would help explain things to them. And the people that follow the madhab of Imam Malik, they would come and he would talk to them. But he knew the madhahib more than the people that were into those madhahibs at that time. And Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah is mentioned that when he talks that the knowledge would just come out of his mouth like water. One time, it's been mentioned that one time someone asked him one hadith and he answered while he's standing, and this became a book. This became a small risala. He's standing, someone asked him, he turned around and he answered. He gave his answer, and that became a whole book. One time when he was teaching a class, a Jewish man came to him, and he wrote a 8-line poem. He wrote 8 lines of poetry that talks about the decree, the qadr, and how this Jewish man, he was saying that this qadr that you believe in, that you guys, the Muslim, believe in, is not something established and is not something correct. And he was mentioning this. So Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, he was teaching a class at this point. So Shaykh Islam, when this man came to him, Shaykh Islam, he let him finish, and he replied back with 148 lines of poetry. He replied back with 148 lines of poetry. This is why the scholars, they say about Shaykh Islam, they say the knowledge that he was given, it's like a karama, like a miracle that was given to him. Also, Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he refuted and he learned many different fields. He learned the science of kalam, al-mantiq. The people of al-mantiq, like, those that dive too much into philosophy. They dive into philosophy too. Al-mantiq, the people of kalam, ahlul kalam. So Shaykh al-Islam, he studied this science. He studied this science of al-mantiq, of the people of kalam. He studied this science just so he can refute the people of kalam. Just so that he can refute these people of kalam. So, and he would refute them using their own books and their own works. And this is why when you look at the books of Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he wrote books for beginners, for students of knowledge like us, and he wrote books for advanced, and he also wrote books for people about other deviated groups to refute them as well. So, and he wrote books on the people of Ahlul Kalam. So that's why the scholars, they don't advise students like myself and us here to read the books of Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah unless you know which level it is. Because if you read the wrong thing, then you would read and you will say, what? How can he say something like this? But he wrote that book for a specific group of people, and he is talking in a specific way. He's talking the way they talk, and he's refuting them using their own books and they're using their own works. Some of his teachers, he had over 200 teachers. He had over 200 teachers, and 4 of them were females. From the 200 teachers, 40 of them, he was very close to them. And also 40 of those 200, he was very close to them. And also there was 4 female scholars that he also looked up to as well. He had also 4 female scholars that he looked up to. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he never got married. He never got married. Why? Because he was very busy. He was busy in knowledge. He was busy in fighting and defending the Muslims. He was busy in prison, in and out of prison. Why? Because he's speaking the truth. Why? Because he's, commanding the good and forbidding the evil. And there are other scholars too who did not get married, like Imam al-Nawawi. He never got married. They asked Imam al-Nawawi, why did you not get married? He said, I forgot. He said, because I forgot. Also, Imam al-Suyuti did not get married. Imam al-Tabari also, they did not get married. And then also Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he was also known to always command the good, order the good, and forbid the evil. During his time, the people used to go and worship idols. People used to go and they would worship idols. And they would go and they would also worship the grave as well. So what did Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah do? He went to them. First and foremost, those that were worshiping the graves, they would worship graves and they would say, we are worshiping this grave because Prophet Ayub is here. Because Prophet Yusuf is buried there. Because of this Tabi'i is there, Abdullah bin Zubayr. They would mention names of companions and name of prophets. So he went to them and he showed them with knowledge that there's it cannot be, their grave cannot be here. He showed them with knowledge that Prophet Ayub did not even come to this land, or he did not die here. He died over there. How can his grave be here? And also he showed them using he also advised them and taught them using the Quran and the Sunnah that we're not supposed to behave this way. So he went and he destroyed, the idols that was there. And he told the people to get away from this grave that they're worshiping. And this is not the way to get close to Allah. Also, he used to send letters to the Christians, to the kings, and he would send them letter, and he would tell them, he would say, what you're following is not correct because of this and because of that. And he would tell them that, your leaders are using this and they're saying this, and it's not correct because of this and because of that. He would always send them letters. Also, at his time, there were some extreme people that were making the people to worship them. Some extreme people that were making the common people worship them, and they would trick them. How? They used to, some of the scholars have mentioned that they would seek the help of the shaitan, or they would put on their body things that would protect them from being from the fire burning their skin. So they would make a fire in the middle of the city, and they would go inside the water, and they would have a fire, and they would go inside the fire, and they would come out, and they're not hurt, nothing is burned, they're not in any pain. So the people would glorify them and people would honor them. So Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah one day he said to them, listen, he said, I will make a deal with you. I'll make a deal with you that we use a vinegar, we wash ourselves with vinegar. We wash ourselves with vinegar, and we will both walk inside the fire together. Let us go inside the fire together. But before you go inside the fire, wash your body with vinegar and hot water. Why? Because he's making sure that they're not using any of the oil or that they would spray on their body or put on their body so that the body doesn't affect them. So he says, use vinegar and see what happens. And they refused. And then that exposed them. And the people, they turned away from them. He also used to go and he would advise the rulers as well. One of the ruler at that time, all of the scholars, they came. And Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, where is he? They pointed to him. He went to him and he said, listen, you claim to be a Muslim, but you're harming the Muslims. And your forefathers, they were not Muslims, but they were good to the Muslims. He told them that you claim to be a Muslim, but you're harming the Muslims. When your fathers, who were not Muslims, were good to the Muslims. And everyone in the room at this time, they covered their face because they think that the ruler is gonna come and stick out his sword and put his head on the floor. But no, the ruler respected him and even made him closer, and he accepted this from him, and he would always seek advice from him. Also, Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, he busy himself going with the battles. He would physically go to the battlefield. The Tatars who would come to the Muslims and attack the Muslims. Shaykh Islam would be in the first row, and he would defend. And even one incident, and he said to the man standing next to him, he said, where is the weakest point? Where is the Muslim the weakest from, so I can go on that side and defend that side. But just like how he was brave in knowledge, he was also brave in the battlefield as well. Also, there was a Jewish man that came from Medina. He came from Medina and he came to the Muslims and he told the Muslims, listen, I have a letter from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in this letter, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that there is no more jizya. Jizya is the tax that the Muslims would pay. Jizya is the tax that the Muslims, jizya is the tax that the non-Muslims would pay to the Muslims for living there and protecting them. For the Jewish, he brought a letter. He said, this letter, the Prophet gave it to me, and is handed down from generations and generations. And they said that the Prophet said that the jizya has been abrogated. Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, and the Muslims, they were confused. Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, he said he looked into this, he said no, and he exposed this man to be a liar. For when the Muslims needed him and they needed knowledge, he came and he also helped them as well. When it comes to his personality, he never took anything personal. And he didn't take anything personal. People talked about him, people bashed him, people gave him names, people, mocked him, but never ever did he give in. Never did he take it the wrong way. One time, he had a difference of opinion from one of the scholars at that time. And that scholar, he decided to go to the ruler. And he told the ruler, listen, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah is saying some things about you, and he's saying some things that's negative. You should deal with him. So the ruler, he called Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and when he questioned him, he found out that he wasn't, that was telling the truth. So he left him alone. So those few group of scholars that wanted to get Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah in trouble, and when they did not succeed, what they did was they planned and they plotted to overthrow that ruler. And that ruler, his name was Muhammad ibn Qaylun. So they went and they overthrew that ruler. And when the new ruler came, they imprisoned Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. So group of scholars, they came. They said that we need to get rid of him. So they plotted and they put him in jail. And they overthrew the ruler that said that rejected him the first time. And Shaykh Islam, he was in prison for about 7 to 8 months. After those 7-8 months, Muhammad ibn Qaylun, he came and he overtook his position. He came and with some help, he overtook his position and he took out Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah from jail. And when he took out Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah from jail, the people saw him. He had a long conversation with Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And then after he left, some of his students said, "Oh Shaykh, what was the Amir telling you? What was he talking to you about?" And then he said, the Shaykh, the Amir, the ruler, he was asking me if I can give him a fatwa to go and kill all of those scholars who plotted against him and me. So the Shaykh said, give me a fatwa to go imprison them forever or to kill them. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, listen, if you kill, there are scholars, there are people of knowledge. If you kill them, then you're going to kill a lot of good. Who's going to spread the good to the people? He said, no, forgive him. He said, no, don't do that. That's why one of the scholars, when they heard this, they said, may Allah have mercy on Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. When he had the upper hand, he showed us mercy. When he had the upper hand, he showed us mercy. And then also, Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he wrote a book, a Aqidah book about Al-Hamawiyyah. Because of that book and what he mentioned, because he talked about the correct way of Aqidah, he went to jail for that book. When he wrote Al-Wasitiyyah, he went to jail for that book, and he spent 18 months in jail. And when he came out after 18 months and he came out of jail, the people said, no, you will not be here. We need to kick you out. You need to go to Egypt. You will not spend here with us. So they kicked him out to Egypt, from Syria all the way to Egypt. And when he came to Egypt, the people, because at that time, brothers and sisters, at that time, bid'ah and innovation was so widespread. Bid'ah innovation was very widespread. Why was bid'ah widespread? Because like we mentioned in the beginning, the Tars, they would come inside and they would attack the Muslims and then they would leave. So the Muslims would always be moving. The Muslims would move from this land to that land. Some of the Muslims would be they would move from one place to another place. So now you have Muslims from different places and different background coming together, living in one area. And everyone will bring their culture and everyone will bring their what they used to do back home. So there was a lot of innovation. And Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he used to refute all of that. So when he left Syria and they took him to Egypt, the people of Egypt, they were very upset with what he was writing. So they said, no, you need to go to jail even more. And he spent 8 months in jail over there. Also some of the fatwas that he gave, he used to tell the people, listen, you cannot travel from one place to another place, or you cannot travel to go see a grave of another person. You cannot travel to another place for act of worship, except for the three places, Mecca, Medina, and Masjid Aqsa. And you cannot go to these graves. So they said, oh no. So they said, you are against the grave, you are against us visiting the grave. And they became very upset at this statement that he made. And because of that, they put him in jail. He mentioned that you cannot go to Medina with the intention of going to the Prophet Masjid. So when you go to Medina, when you go to the Prophet city, may Allah take all of us there, you cannot go there and say the only purpose I'm coming here is to go to the Prophet grave. No. Your intention, I'm going there to go to the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And since you are already there, it's from the etiquette, now you go give salam to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the legislated way. You give the salam the way it's supposed to be given. You don't stop your feet, you keep walking. There's an etiquette of giving that. So Shaykh Taymiyyah mentioned that you cannot travel to Medina only to go see the Prophet grave. They also became upset. They said, oh, you don't like the Prophet. They threw him in jail. Also, he had another issue. At that time, a famous issue was that if a husband says to his wife, I divorce you 3 times in one sitting, they used to say that then this woman, she cannot come back to him unless she marries, gets divorced, and come back. So if a husband says to his wife, I divorce you 3 times, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmed, Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi, all of the 4 Imams, they say that if he says it in one sitting, then it will count as 3 divorces. And then his wife cannot bring her back. But Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said no. He said 3, if a husband says 3 divorce in one sitting, he says no, that counts once. He said if he does it in one sitting, it counts once. And he mentioned that this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he said. And he also mentioned this is what Abu Bakr as-Siddiq mentioned. But during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, there were a lot of people that were abusing this. There were a lot of people that would say to their wife, you are divorced 3 times, every single time, like in the first sitting, 3 times. So Umar ibn al-Khattab, to stop that, he mentioned that anyone who says to his wife, you are divorced 3 times in one sitting, that is going to count as 3 divorce. And you cannot bring her back unless she gets married, divorced, and then you can bring her back. So when Umar ibn Khattab, he took this stand because of the people were spreading this, people were going extreme in this, and it continued even to the 4 madhahib. But Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah was mentioning, no, he said no, that was for a specific time and for a specific reason. But the foundation, the asl, is that in one sitting, if you do 3, it doesn't count as the divorce unless you are very specific in your wording. But because of this issue, they said, and the people at that time, they were very extreme in their madhahib. So they were like, wow, are you going against this? Are you going against the imams? And they also they had issue with him as well, and they threw him in prison. But Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, every time he went to prison, he would make the best out of it. And you have that famous statement that he made. He said, "Ma yasna'u a'da'i bi." What can my enemies do to me? You know, Jannati, he said, Jannati wa bustani fi sadri. He said, Jannah and my garden is inside my chest, meaning it's in my heart. Ayna ruht fahiya ma'i. Wherever I go is going to be with me. La tufariquni. It's not going to separate from me. My Jannah is in my heart. You know, habsi khalwa. If you take me to prison, then this is a time for me to be alone with Allah. Wa qatli shahada. And if you kill me, I'll become a shaheed. وإخراجي من بلدي سياحة. And if you kick me out of my land, then this will be like I'm a tourist. I'm gonna go and see the different lands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Shaykh al-Islam, every negative thing that came to his life, he would use it and he would turn it to something positive. And this is something we should do. Anytime we are going through some type of test, some type of calamity, find a way to turn that into a positive. So Shaykh Islam, when he went to prison, no problem. He started teaching the people in prison. He started his da'wah in prison. So much so that the school inside the prison was stronger than the universities at that time. So much so that the people in prison, when they left, when it was time for them to leave prison, they would cry and they would commit a crime to come back inside the prison to learn from Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. He was in prison, but Ibn Kathir, while he was in prison, the leaders and the people in the government, they would come to him and they would send him letters and they would say, we have a question, please clarify this for us. And he wrote most of his books while he was in prison. But throughout the last time he went to prison, what they did to him was they took away his books. They took away his books and they took away his pens, what he used to write. And this is what affected him the most. And when they put him in prison at that time, he became, so what he did was he turned to the Quran. He turned to the Quran and he started reading the Quran. And it's been mentioned that he read the Quran about 88 times in the last time he was in prison. 88 times he read the Quran. And he died in the year 728. He died inside the prison. He became sick and the sickness became worse. And in the year 728, in the month of the Qa'dah, he died in prison. And he died while he was reading the verse, the Quran that he was reciting, إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي جَنَّاتٍ وَنَهَرٍ. Indeed, the righteous people will be among those people that will be in Jannah, in garden, where rivers will be flowing. فِي مَقْعَدِ صِدْقٍ عِنْدَ مَلِيكٍ مُقْتَدِرٍ. They will have a seat, a honorable seat. But this is the last verse that he recited. So in the year 728, he died in prison. And over 60,000 people came to his janazah. And his brother Abdullah is the one who came and led this prayer. And with all of this test that he went through and all of this trial that he went through, he, as they mentioned, he never had a gray hair. What surah is that? That is Surah Qamar, the last two verses of Surah Al-Qamar. And Surah Qamar is the surah above Ar-Rahman. The surah above Ar-Rahman. So he read that verse and this is where he died. And his brother Abdullah came and he led his janaz. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he did not have any gray hair when he died. With all of the stress and all of the problem he went through, no gray hair, which shows his tawakkul upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being pleased with whatever that comes to him. So a lesson that we can take from his life is the importance of patience in da'wah. If you want to do da'wah, many people, they want to do da'wah, they want to spread, and the best thing you could do is do da'wah. But da'wah, it needs patience. Sometimes you go give a lecture and only one person will show. You keep going. Sometimes you're studying or you're giving a lecture and someone would come and would criticize you and say, what are you talking about? And I did not like what you said. And what you said is like this. No, you don't give up. You don't say, okay, God, no, it doesn't. I'm not. You keep going. Giving da'wah and talking to people and bring them close to Islam is not a sweet ride all the time. Sometimes it's sweet and sometimes it's bitter. So you have to have patience with you. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran always and commands the Prophet with patience. What Allah tells the Prophet, وَلَقَدْ كُذِّبَتْ رُسُلٌ مِّن قَبْلِكَ. O Prophet Muhammad, before you, prophets were, they were belied, they were rejected. But فَصَبَرُوا عَلَى مَا كُذِّبُوا, but they showed patience. When the people, it's okay, they showed patience. وَأُوذُوا, and all the hardship, they showed patience. حَتَّى أَتَاهُمْ نَصْرُنَا, until our victory came to them. So the Prophet ﷺ is reminding the Prophet, be patient, O Prophet Muhammad. You want to do da'wah, even for you to learn, seeking knowledge needs sabr. Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Inna nahnu nazzalna alayka al-Qur'ana tanzila. O Prophet, and this we're going to end with this one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed us that inna nahnu, Allah is telling the Prophet, we indeed sent down the Quran. Inna nahnu nazzalna alayka al-Qur'ana tanzila. We are the one who sent down this Quran upon you. So I will ask you guys, isn't this a great blessing for Allah to send the Quran upon the Prophet? Isn't this a great blessing for the Prophet to have the Quran revealed to him? This is a question for the brothers and sisters.
No.
Yes, it's a huge blessing. Naam, yes, it's a huge. So you would think, right? You would think that Allah then would say, so be grateful. If Allah told the Prophet, and we revealed the Quran to you, you would think that then Allah would say, so be grateful for that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna nahnu nazzalna alayka al-Qur'ana tanzila fasbir. Fasbir. Be patient. Because this Quran that's coming to you, it's gonna make people come and attack you and throw stones at you, and it's gonna make people boycott you, and it's gonna make people call you crazy, and it's gonna make people call you a poet, it's gonna make people call you a magician. But fasbir, be patient. Da'wah requires patience. Da'wah requires patience, and it's not a sweet ride, and it requires also physical patience as well. Traveling, some people, they don't want to give da'wah in different places. No, you should travel if you have to. Physically be patient. Be patient in delivering. Be patient in preparing what you're going to give in the da'wah. Right? Be patient in when you deliver. Be patient with how the people react to you. For Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah was one of the sheikhs that the scholars, they say that he is almost like he's definitely a mujaddid, someone that came to revive the religion. إن الله يبعث لهذه الأمة على رأس كل 100 سنة من يجدد لها دينها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet said, Allah will rise from this community, meaning from this ummah, every 100 years, someone to bring energy or revive the religion. Naam, someone to revive the religion. And this was Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah at that time. So this is the author of the book that we're studying. The author is Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and this was a brief bio, like very brief bio of the Shaykh. And I encourage all of us to go back and to read about his life and to get to know him more. And also the works that he wrote is many. He wrote in almost every single field. In Aqidah, in Fiqh, in Usul Tafsir, in Quran, in almost every field, he has a something on it. Inshallah, we end with that. Next class, we will talk about why we chose this book, why this topic, why did we choose a book about Aqidah, inshallah. So our next class will be why did we choose a book that talks about Aqidah. That will be our book. Subhanakallah. And inshallah, like we mentioned, please, brothers and sisters, I encourage you guys to take notes and to share the notes together and put the notes, in places where everyone can see each other so that we can all benefit. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.